The room felt heavier than air, and for the first time, even the cameras seemed hesitant to move closer. Yara's voice cracked as she whispered something about not knowing if love was enough anymore. That one line sent fans spiraling because whispers had already started that divorce papers might be on the table. People thought it was tabloid noise, until now. When Yara's tears hit that living room floor, you could feel a relationship collapsing in real time. This is Sabrina, and you're watching TLC Drama Live, where we break down the chaos, the truth, and the heartbreak behind the camera. Make sure you hit subscribe and tell me in the comments whose side you're on tonight, because this one will divide everyone. Jasmine walked in like she always does. Confident, dramatic, but strangely calm this time. She saw Yara crying and her expression changed. Less judgment, more concern. It's wild, because Jasmine isn't exactly the poster child for stability, yet somehow she became the one person Yara could talk to. Everyone else kept their distance, whispering, avoiding eye contact. That's the thing about these cast trips. You see alliances shift faster than the weather. Yara confessed in bits and pieces. She said she felt lost, like she and Jovi were two strangers living side by side, doing life but not together. She said they'd been like this for a while, detached, polite, but cold. Jovi had his own routines, she had hers. It wasn't yelling or cheating that broke them. It was silence, the kind that kills you slowly. You could tell she wasn't exaggerating. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped like someone carrying invisible weight. She talked about their daughter, how she deserves to grow up around happy parents, not just two people pretending. The guilt was all over her. She said Jovi had mentioned separation more than once, like testing the idea before making it real. And the worst part? She admitted she'd thought about it too. Fans online had seen the tension building for months. The awkward interviews, the forced smiles, the separate vacations, all the signs were there. But seeing Yara break down like that turned speculation into something painful and human. She said she wanted Jovi to be happy, even if that meant not with her. Those words came out quiet, but they hit hard. Jasmine listened, and for a moment, she didn't interrupt. Then she leaned in with that classic mix of honesty and bluntness and asked, "If you didn't have your daughter, would you still stay with him?" It was the kind of question that could end a friendship, but Yara didn't flinch. She said yes, because despite everything, Jovi was her support system, the person she still loved, even if they'd forgotten how to show it. The silence after that was thick. You could see Jasmine trying to decide if she'd helped or made things worse. For Yara, the tears kept coming, not dramatic, just steady. The kind that mean you've already made peace with the hurt. And as the night closed in, everyone watching could feel it. This wasn't a storyline anymore. It was a woman at the breaking point, a husband losing the thread, and a friend trying to fix something she barely understood. But the real question hung in the air, quiet and sharp. Did Jasmine's advice bring them closer to healing, or push Yara closer to walking away for good? Silence had started creeping into their lives long before the tears showed up on camera. Yara said it wasn't one big fight, it was the absence of connection. No screaming, no chaos, just two people who stopped talking about what mattered. She'd wake up, make breakfast, check her phone, and realize the only texts she got from Jovi were about schedules, not feelings. That's when she knew something was slipping. At first, she brushed it off as normal. Every couple has phases. But then days turned into weeks, and the laughter that used to fill their house got replaced by polite small talk. She said she felt invisible, like her emotions bounced off walls instead of landing somewhere safe. And that's when she called it detachment. The word sounded clinical, but for Yara it meant living next to someone she loved and still feeling alone. From Jovi's side, things didn't look simpler. Friends close to him said he'd been working non-stop, trying to provide, trying to be the steady one. He wasn't cruel or careless. He was tired. The kind of tired that makes you choose silence over arguments. When he came home from a trip, he'd find Yara scrolling through photos of New York or watching old videos of their daughter, smiling quietly at memories instead of him. For Jovi, that smile wasn't comforting. It reminded him of what he was losing. Fans online called it the slow fade, and they weren't wrong. It's the invisible breakup that happens inside a relationship long before anyone says the words out loud. Yara said it best when she told a producer that love doesn't die in explosions. It dies in everyday routines. In doing your own laundry, eating alone, and pretending everything's fine because it's easier than starting another fight. She talked about how she tried to fix it, more date nights, more patience, but something had already changed. She said Jovi started answering questions with one-word replies, then eventually stopped asking her any. And when that happens, you don't need a villain. You need honesty. Yara admitted she wasn't blameless. Her independence, which once made her strong, now made her distant. Psychologists might call it emotional disconnection, but on screen it looked simpler. Two people sharing a bed but living separate lives. It wasn't about who was right, it was about who stopped trying first. And from the way Yara's eyes dropped every time she said his name, you could tell she wasn't ready to lose him. Even though the distance had already started doing the damage, viewers felt the shift too. Every scene felt heavier, every smile a little forced. The couple that once gave fans hope for second chances now looked like strangers forced to play lovers. There's a kind of sadness that doesn't scream. It just lingers, waiting for someone to notice before it's too late. Then came the line that froze everything. Jovi allegedly told her maybe they should separate for a while, that it might be better for both. Not out of anger, but exhaustion. The kind of sentence that sounds calm, but feels like a door closing quietly behind you. And that's when Yara realized silence wasn't just between them anymore. It had become the third person in their marriage. Jasmine had been watching from across the room, her usual spark toned down into something colder, sharper. It wasn't gossip this time, it was curiosity, almost like she wanted to understand Yara's pain rather than feed off it. She sat down beside her, not saying much at first, which for Jasmine was rare. The energy shifted instantly. Everyone nearby went quiet, half expecting another blow-up, half intrigued to see what would come next. Yara wiped her eyes but didn't hide her face. The rawness was too real to mask. She said things weren't fine, that she didn't even know who she was talking to anymore when she looked at Jovi. The tears kept coming, slow but steady, the kind you don't plan. And Jasmine, the same woman who's built a reputation on being fire and chaos, leaned in and told her, "You need to stop pretending everything's okay." That hit hard. Coming from Jasmine, it felt almost ironic. The woman who's had public breakdowns, meltdowns, and dramatic confrontations now trying to be the voice of calm. It was like watching a storm turn into a therapist. But somehow, she pulled it off. Maybe because she saw something in Yara she recognized. A woman exhausted from being strong all the time. She told Yara that love shouldn't feel like surviving, that couples can't rebuild anything if they've already stopped touching hearts. Her voice was soft but still fierce, the way only Jasmine could be. The rest of the cast pretended not to listen, but you could feel every eye on them. This wasn't the usual argument. It was a moment too intimate for cameras, yet too powerful to ignore. Yara admitted she didn't know how to fix things anymore. She said she'd tried everything: therapy, patience, silence, but nothing worked. Her husband was there physically, but emotionally, he was miles away. She confessed she still loved him, but didn't feel loved back. Jasmine's face softened, like she'd been there before. Then, Jasmine started playing the fixer. She said maybe Yara and Jovi needed to step back before stepping forward, that sometimes distance makes people see what they're about to lose. She promised she'd help her find clarity, to remind her of the woman she was before the marriage drained her spirit. For a second, it felt like genuine sisterhood. Two women trying to hold each other up in the wreckage of reality TV. But tension followed close behind, because everyone watching knew Jasmine never helps without stirring something. Her version of saving usually means breaking something first. And as Yara kept crying, Jasmine's eyes narrowed, like she was deciding what truth to throw next. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Then Jasmine asked the question that froze the entire room. Would you still stay if you didn't have your daughter? The air shifted instantly. Even Yara stopped breathing for a moment. No one moved. It was one of those questions that doesn't demand an answer. It exposes one. Yara looked down, tears falling again, but her voice didn't shake this time. She said yes, because despite everything, she still loved him. And in that single answer, the whole room realized this wasn't just about saving a marriage. It was about saving herself from losing the last piece of hope she still believed in. It started like a whisper, The kind of secret you almost don't want to say out loud, because once you do, there's no taking it back. Yara's voice trembled when she said it. She had once met with a divorce lawyer. The entire energy in the room shifted. Even Jasmine's confident posture broke for a second. No one expected that. It wasn't anger that filled the space. It was disbelief. Yara explained she didn't go there to end her marriage, but to understand what ending it would mean. She wanted clarity, not escape. In her words, it was about knowing her options, but behind that explanation, you could hear something else. Fear. Fear of being trapped in a relationship that had stopped feeling safe emotionally. Fear of losing herself while trying to hold it all together. People in love don't always prepare for the end because they want to leave. Sometimes they prepare because they're scared they might have to. It's a form of emotional survival, a way to breathe when things start suffocating you. Yara said she hadn't filed anything, hadn't told Jovi, but she couldn't carry the thought alone anymore. That single decision, walking into a lawyer's office, was her quiet cry for help. You could feel the internet light up even before the episode ended. Clips of her confession flooded social media. Some called her selfish, others called her brave, but most people saw what was really there. A woman trying to understand her limits before life crossed them for her. Then came Jovi's side, and it wasn't pretty. When he found out, the shock turned to anger, then silence. Friends said he didn't shout or curse, he simply went cold. He told a producer he felt betrayed, not because of the meeting itself, but because she didn't trust him enough to tell him. He said, "We could have talked, but she went outside our marriage instead." That line spread like wildfire across fan pages. For Jovi, it wasn't about paperwork or legality. It was about faith. He'd always seen himself as the provider, the anchor, and now he felt like the ground under him had cracked. He admitted he wasn't perfect, that he'd pulled away, that he'd shut down emotionally. But hearing that Yara had gone that far made him question everything. Whether their fights were even worth fixing if one foot was already out the door. Yara didn't fight back. She said quietly that she didn't regret seeking information because pretending everything was fine would have been the real betrayal. That kind of honesty hurts more than lies because it exposes everything you've been avoiding. As fans debated who was right, one comment from Jovi started circulating everywhere. Maybe she already made her choice. It wasn't said with rage. It was resignation. A man realizing the woman he loves might be preparing for a future without him. And somewhere behind the screen, Yara probably saw that post too. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. She was still deciding whether love was worth holding on to when trust had already let go. The paternity rumor didn't start with proof. It started with timing. The same week Yara flew alone to New York, Jovi made a strange joke during a group chat. The kind of joke that hides something darker underneath. He laughed and said, "If the baby turns out to be Dane's, praise God, because then I can get out of this mess." The word slipped out like a defense mechanism, but everyone watching caught the sting. Dane. That name hadn't been heard in years. Yara's ex from before Jovi, a quiet, clean-cut guy who'd once lived in New Orleans and now worked in New York. Fans knew about him because Yara herself had mentioned they were still friendly. It wasn't an affair, not even close, but it was enough to plant a seed in Jovi's mind, especially when he started noticing how often Yara traveled to New York alone. The whispers started small. One fan comment, one Reddit thread, and suddenly people were questioning everything. Why was Yara always so defensive when New York came up? Why did she seem lighter there and tense when she came back? The speculation spiraled faster than anyone could control. By the time the episode aired, the internet was already framing Dane as the unseen third player in a marriage falling apart. Jovi didn't handle it well. He laughed too much when it came up, joked about it on camera, but behind those smirks was something raw. Insecurity mixed with resentment. He'd always been the loud one, the fun one, but now he was the suspicious one. Every time Yara left the room to take a call, his eyes followed. Every time she mentioned a friend in New York, he froze for a beat. What hurt most was that Yara had no real way to prove loyalty without humiliating herself. She told him over and over that there was nothing there. That Dane was just someone from her past, but in relationships where trust is already cracked, even truth sounds like a lie. Jovi's "Praise God" line became a meme overnight. People clipped it, captioned it, turned it into punchlines. But underneath the humor was a man unraveling. That sentence wasn't confidence, it was pain disguised as sarcasm. When men feel powerless, they often hide behind mockery. And when love turns to fear, even a joke can sound like revenge. Friends close to Jovi said he didn't believe the rumor entirely, but he believed enough to feel justified in his distance. That's the poison of doubt. It doesn't need to be true to destroy everything around it. It just needs to live rent-free in your mind long enough for love to suffocate. Yara, meanwhile, refused to play defense publicly. She said nothing on social media, nothing in interviews. Silence became her shield. The more she ignored the noise, the angrier Jovi seemed to get. Because silence, when you're insecure, feels like guilt. And as that tension built, fans started asking the one question no one wanted to answer. Would Jovi actually demand a DNA test, not to find truth, but to finally silence the demons he'd created in his own head? New York had become more than a city for Yara. It was her escape hatch. Whenever things got too tense at home, she'd book a flight, pack light, and disappear into the noise of Manhattan. She said it helped her breathe, that walking through crowded streets made her feel invisible in a good way. But for Jovi, every trip to New York felt like a threat. He didn't understand why she needed to leave so often or why she seemed happier there than with him. At first, no one paid attention. Yara had friends in the city, business opportunities, and collaborations that made sense for her growing brand. She'd post pictures from cafes, fashion events, and meetups. Always innocent, always solo. But the internet never sleeps, and soon fans started connecting dots that maybe weren't there. They noticed she never tagged Jovi, never mentioned him during those trips. They dug through her old posts and found comments from her ex Dane from years back. It didn't take long for speculation to spin into accusation. Jovi's friends said he tried to ignore it. He told himself she needed space, that she'd come back refreshed. But then came the moment that changed everything. A castmate claimed that Jovi once scrolled through Yara's phone and saw messages from someone in New York. Nothing explicit, just friendly texts, but enough to feed his doubts. No one knows exactly what those messages said or if they even existed. But that didn't matter. The rumor itself was enough to set off a chain reaction. On screen, Yara defended herself. She said the trips were for work, for peace, for time away from constant tension. She said she'd grown used to being blamed for problems she didn't cause. Her tone wasn't angry. It was tired. You could see the kind of exhaustion that comes from always being misunderstood. She didn't raise her voice or point fingers. She simply said, "I need time to miss him." And that line hit harder than any denial could. Because needing time to miss someone means you've already stopped feeling their presence. The emotional distance was undeniable. It wasn't infidelity. It was disconnection dressed up as independence. Jovi's reaction, though, came through in the smallest ways. He'd joke about her second life in New York, but the jokes carried an edge. You could tell he wasn't laughing. When a man feels replaced by a city, by a version of his partner that doesn't need him, the insecurity eats him alive. He didn't accuse her directly, but his silence said more than words ever could. The cast trip became the stage for their quiet Cold War. Every mention of New York made Jovi stiffen. Every time Yara smiled at her phone, cameras zoomed in, feeding the rumor machine. Fans took sides, some calling Yara selfish, others calling Jovi controlling. But the truth sat somewhere in between. Two people chasing space instead of solutions. By the time the episode aired, the whispers had become impossible to contain. And then came the twist that set social media on fire. A castmate claimed Jovi had actually found proof, private messages linked to those New York trips. Whether it was real or rumor, no one could say. But one thing was clear. Trust had already left the room long before those texts ever did. The tension on that trip had been simmering for days, and when it finally cracked, it wasn't a blow-up. It was a quiet detonation. Cameras caught Yara pulling her suitcase through the villa hallway, while Jovi followed behind, stone-faced. No words, no explanations, just two people done pretending for everyone else's comfort. When they told the group they were leaving early, you could feel the shock ripple across the room. But shock quickly turned to judgment. Elizabeth barely looked up from her phone, muttering something under her breath that sounded like figures. Andre crossed his arms, that half-smirk spreading like he'd been waiting for this. It wasn't sympathy, it was satisfaction. For them, every couple's failure was confirmation that they were still standing. That's the thing about these TLC cast trips. They're not vacations. They're pressure cookers disguised as bonding. Every dinner turns into an interrogation. Every toast hides an agenda. Yara tried to keep her voice calm as she explained that she needed to go home to their daughter, that the drama was getting toxic. But her voice cracked midway, and that tiny break gave everyone something to feed on. Jasmine moved closer, trying to defend her, but Elizabeth rolled her eyes and whispered, "She's running away again." The pettiness was thick enough to taste. Jovi didn't help the situation. Instead of standing beside Yara, he kept a distance. Not physically far, but emotionally miles away. His expression never changed. When Andre threw in a sarcastic comment about people who can't handle adult conversations, Jovi smirked like he agreed. That tiny reaction told everyone watching that whatever was broken between them wasn't temporary. The alliances around the table split instantly. Jasmine and Lorenz sided with Yara, saying it was cruel to mock someone going through real pain. Elizabeth and Andre doubled down, arguing that Yara brought the drama herself. The energy spiraled fast. Old grudges resurfaced, side comments turned into verbal jabs, and the entire trip's fragile peace evaporated in seconds. You could tell Yara was fighting to hold her composure. She hugged Lauren, then Jasmine, then even tried to hug Elizabeth, who stiffened like contact might burn her. The cameras zoomed in as Yara smiled through tears and said, "I don't want bad blood." It was heartbreaking and brave, a woman trying to leave gracefully in a place built for humiliation. Jovi zipped the final suitcase, nodded to the group, and said, "We're done here." The words were simple but final. No apology, no explanation, just a clean exit from a situation that had turned cruel. As they walked out, the silence they left behind was louder than any argument. Back in confessional, Elizabeth told producers she didn't buy the family excuse. She said Yara was embarrassed because people finally saw the cracks in her marriage. Andre chimed in, claiming Jovi had probably had enough of the drama queen act. The comments hit social media before the episode even ended, splitting fans down the middle. Some called Yara's exit self-respect, others called it surrender. But one question hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. Were they escaping the judgment of others? Or each other? The air in that villa could have been cut with a knife. Every face around the room was tight with unspoken judgment, but Yara kept her chin high. She knew everyone was watching, waiting for her to break, to snap back the way others usually did on these trips. But instead of feeding the chaos, she walked straight up to Elizabeth, the one person who had made her feel the smallest, and opened her arms for a hug. Elizabeth hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the cameras, then to Andre, like she needed permission to be human. The hug lasted barely a second, stiff and forced. But that tiny gesture said everything. Yara wasn't there to win an argument. She was trying to end one. And in a room full of people addicted to drama, that kind of grace almost felt rebellious. It wasn't weakness, it was self-control. You could see it in her eyes. The exhaustion, the sadness, but also a quiet refusal to let bitterness define her. She whispered something like, "No hard feelings." Her voice soft enough that the mics barely caught it. Elizabeth gave a quick nod, a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't reconciliation, it was damage control. But still, Yara chose kindness in a space where cruelty gets better ratings. That's the thing about reality TV. The show rewards conflict, not empathy. When someone like Yara tries to act with grace, the camera lingers just long enough to make it look fake. The edit cuts before the sincerity lands. Viewers are taught to crave meltdowns, not maturity. So instead of applause, Yara's hug became another meme. "Too little, too late," read the captions. But behind that moment was a woman who'd spent weeks being torn apart, still choosing to walk out with her dignity intact. Jovi stood behind her, eyes fixed on the ground. He looked more like a man watching the end of something than a partner supporting his wife. Every time Yara reached out, he seemed to pull back emotionally, like he didn't know how to match her calm. It made her kindness feel even lonelier. She wasn't hugging Elizabeth to make peace with her. She was doing it to make peace with herself. When she turned to leave, her steps were slow, deliberate. No shouting, no theatrics, just quiet resolve. Even Jasmine, who had been ready to defend her, went silent, realizing there was nothing left to say. The group's energy stayed frozen in that awkward mix of guilt and pride. Everyone wanted to believe they were the real ones. But in that moment, Yara was the only person not performing for the camera. Outside, away from the noise, she finally let herself cry. Not the dramatic sobs reality TV loves, but small, silent tears. The kind that come from pure exhaustion. She looked at the van waiting to take them away, then back at the villa where friendships had turned into a competition for sympathy. Wiping her face with the back of her hand, she muttered softly, "Some people enjoy others' misery." The words hung there, carried by the night air. Not bitter, not angry, just true. And for once, the cameras didn't need to add drama. The silence that followed said everything. When the episode ended, the internet did what it always does. It exploded. Within hours, hashtags with Jovi and Yara's names were trending across Reddit, X, and Instagram. One camp defended Yara, calling her the only one showing real emotion. The other accused her of playing the victim. Every screenshot, every half sentence became evidence in a digital trial that no one asked for, but everyone wanted to judge. Reddit threads ran thousands of comments deep. Some users claimed Yara's body language during the villa argument proved she was mentally checked out, while others pointed out how Jovi's sarcasm masked insecurity. A viral post titled, "Yara doesn't need a man. She needs peace," racked up tens of thousands of upvotes, while another one mocked her trips to New York as the world's longest coffee break. It was messy, biased, and painfully human, exactly the way fandom debates always are. Instagram was worse. People dissected every new story Yara posted, zooming into reflections, backgrounds, even timestamps. When she uploaded a photo of her daughter playing in the park, commenters filled it with divided takes. Half offered support, the rest demanded answers. Jovi, meanwhile, posted a single photo of himself holding a drink with the caption, "Peace and quiet." That one line launched another round of speculation. Was it shade, a cry for attention, or proof he was over it? Behind the chaos, the real tragedy was how public scrutiny turned private pain into performance. Every couple on TLC knows once their story hits the air, it doesn't belong to them anymore. The audience rewrites it in real time. Fans who once cheered for Yara and Jovi's love story now pick sides like a custody battle. The harder Yara tried to stay silent, the more the silence was treated as confession. Even castmates joined the conversation, some subtly liking shady posts, others dropping prayers emojis that only made things worse. Jasmine reposted a cryptic story about truth hurting before healing, which fans instantly tied to Yara. The comment section turned into a war zone. Some accused Jasmine of stirring things for attention, while others praised her for standing by Yara's side. It didn't matter what she meant. Intent never survives the edit. Jovi's own Reddit AMA months earlier resurfaced too, where he had joked about being the least favorite husband on TLC. People dug it up like it was prophecy. Memes circulated of his praise God line, twisting humor into insult. The internet wasn't just reacting, it was rewriting their marriage as entertainment. Through it all, neither of them made an official statement. No confirmations, no denials, just curated silence. But that only fueled the frenzy. A fan account claimed an anonymous insider had reached out, saying Yara's lawyer visit wasn't the only secret meeting she'd had off camera. Whether it was true or planted for drama, no one knew. But it was enough to light the match again. And just like that, what began as a storyline about love and distance turned into something darker. A modern spectacle of judgment where the audience didn't just watch the downfall, they helped build it. When everything finally quieted down, there was no shouting, no blame, no grand speeches, just Yara and Jovi sitting side by side under studio lights, trying to remember how to talk to each other. The air between them wasn't angry anymore, just tired. You could tell both of them wanted to say the right thing, but didn't know what that was anymore. Yara spoke first. Her voice was soft, but clear. She said she wasn't proud of the choices she made, the lawyer meeting, the silence, the distance. But she did what she thought she had to do to stay sane. She said she loved Jovi, still does, but love doesn't erase hurt. It just makes it harder to leave. Her eyes filled, but she didn't break this time. She'd cried enough for one season. Jovi sat still, listening. For once, no sarcasm, no jokes. He said he never wanted to doubt her, that somewhere along the way, their marriage turned into a scoreboard instead of a partnership. He admitted he was scared. Scared of being the bad guy, scared of losing his family, scared of realizing that love wasn't enough to keep two broken people together. There was no perfect resolution in that confessional, no happy ending tied in a bow. Just honesty. Yara said she wanted to rebuild, but not for the cameras. She wanted to try because their daughter deserved parents who still believed in trying. Jovi nodded, quietly agreeing. The kind of agreement that means, I don't know how, but I'll try too. Watching them, it was impossible not to feel conflicted. You saw two people who had every reason to walk away, but were still sitting side by side, still hoping. It wasn't romantic, it was human. And maybe that's what makes their story hurt the most. Not the drama, but the reality that love sometimes survives humiliation. Not because it's easy, but because it's stubborn. For viewers, the loop closed, but the ache stayed. The lawyer rumor was real, but no papers were filed. The New York trips happened, but there was no proof of betrayal. The DNA bomb was a fear that never became fact. Everything between them lived in that gray space, where half-truths and insecurities build walls faster than lies ever could. As the camera lingered on Yara wiping her eyes and Jovi staring at the floor, you could almost feel the question hanging there, heavy and unsolved. Can love survive when both people have been humiliated by each other, by the public, by their own mistakes? Or does survival just mean staying long enough to pretend the pain doesn't matter anymore? This is Sabrina, and you've been watching TLC Drama Live. What we saw tonight wasn't just a couples fight. It was the cost of turning love into television. Sometimes the real story doesn't end when the cameras stop rolling. Sometimes it keeps playing in the silence that follows. But what happens when another couple crosses the same line? Next week, you'll see who finally walks out for good.